Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. Humid day in good old Connecticut. So, who said, you're a baseball fan, I believe, who said deja vu all over again? Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, Yogi Berra.
You are correct. And sometimes, well, many times he is correct. So, we have Basement 2.0 with Mamala basically having no policy statements on her website, no interviews. What do they call it? Bupkas, I believe they call it. She'll do a CNN pre-recorded interview discussion, and she'll have a chaperone or esteemed running mate. I don't know what good he's going to do, but anyway, your thoughts, Dr. Lopkin. And right now, not that polls are excruciatingly important, but they're a bellwether. Vegas gives her a 55% chance of Vegas odds.
Yeah,
How is this possible?
the Vegas odds reflect the traditional post-convention bump, but I mean, you ask what good is going to be Tim Waltz being at the interview? The good is going to be he's going to be able to deflect when she starts going off on a word salad, and he's going to be able to interrupt when she starts looking bad. She is not capable of answering questions. And in fact, a pundit on CNN said that Harris's insistence on bringing Waltz to the interview shows that she has a complete lack of confidence in her own abilities. She's also pushing back on the ABC debate with Trump. She wants to change the rules now. Now she's decided she wants to have notes because she can't remember anything. She can't talk off the cuff. So she wants to be
I,
able to write things down ahead of time, or more appropriately, have a script writer write them so that she can just say things, off of her cue cards.
okay, a eighth grader could do that. All you have to do is have them categorized, organized, deficit. B, I am for. Am I correct?
Yeah, except I'm going to push back on one thing. You said an eighth grader could do it. A fourth grader could do this.
Very good, 100%. I don't think it's going to fly. I think Trump's pushed back on that, but this shows. I don't understand how the odds are 55% for her. Geez, I've never seen anything like it. I would.
Well,
She did. They did say she did get a boost in the DNC, but I thought that was a colossal failure. But and even for the point of they were lying, saying that Taylor Swift and Beyonce was going to be there, and guess what? No show. I don't think they were ever even going to show. They just wanted two
no, I
people.
don't think either one was actually scheduled. They just thought it was going to happen, or more likely, they just spread the rumor to build the
Yeah, to keep people
enthusiasm.
tuned.
One of the, not just people, one of the producers of the DNC gave an interview to Hollywood Reporter where he said even he was under the impression that Beyonce was coming. So I think they needed to keep the energy up on the floor for the sake of the show. And that's why they did this. As for the Vegas odds are affected by the polling. The polling, yes, there was a bump after the convention. It was much smaller than traditional post-convention bumps. But I think all of this actually comes down to a statement that was made a few days ago. Democratic Party pollsters have been saying now they think they're in a lot of trouble because Trump supporters are not responding to surveys. Republicans are not responding to surveys. So they're coming out with these great numbers for Harris, but the sample size and the statistical accuracy of these samples is skewed towards Kamala because Trump supporters don't trust the pollsters. Republicans don't trust the pollsters. So now the Democratic pollsters are actually coming out and going, we may have a bigger problem than these polls indicate.
Well, I certainly hope so because, you can disagree on issues, but to have someone that is so incompetent, again, her biggest accomplishment in life was passing the bar exam second time, by the way, or second, take two stabs at it, and having an affair with Willie Brown when he was 60 and she was 29, and he was married. Other than that, it's like white noise. And I know that the Democrats know that's the case. I mean, it's inexcusable not to have not one interview for 30. What are you waiting for? 30 days?
Not just
But
no
she's flip flopped on everything.
right, not just no interviews. She's put no concrete policy opinions out. She hasn't even taken questions except for one very quick thing where she spoke to reporters outside of Air Force Two and made no sense whatsoever and didn't come close to answering their questions. They know she is not ready for this. If they honestly believed that she was ready to be president, they would have forced Biden out much earlier. But they know she's
Good
not
analysis.
ready. And the only reason that they did force Biden out at this point was because it was blatantly obvious after his debate that he is no longer capable of doing the job. I think there's a very good chance you're going to see the same thing after the Harris Trump debate. The public is going to see she is not capable of doing the job.
I would agree. I think that depending on the question, ABC is highly biased. So I do give credit to CNN. Jake Tapper and the crew did a good job, but I'm a
They did
little
a yeah,
leery.
they did a great
I'm
job with the debate,
fantastic job.
but right now they're at CNN is actually going to have a do or die moment with that Harris interview, because if they lob softballs at her, it's going to destroy the credibility that they've been building up over the last several months. So it's going to be interesting from that point of view also what happens during that interview.
Well, also let me talk about her chaperone. He's not exactly the most articulate dude in the world either. So it's like having you're drowning, and the person that's going to save you has never gone to the YMCA swim camp.
Yeah,
So
it's not a good matchup. Honestly, the advantage that Harris has bringing Waltz is just that it's going to deflect attention away from her. I doubt he's going to look any better, although he is better than she is at delivering prepared remarks. So if they prep him enough, he has a better chance of passing muster on this interview than she does. And
and the,
her own staff has constantly said she refuses to do her homework. Well, if she doesn't do her homework on this in the debate, she's done.
100%, I would agree. Um, I do think, and I'd like your comments, and I'm sure our listeners well, the impact of the RFK Kelsey Gabbard, not only endorsement but willingness to actually support Trump. I thought that would have more of an impact. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not surprised that it didn't have the impact because the delivery wasn't done well. RFK went off on a lot of different topics. For it to really have blunted Harris's bump and for it to really have an effect, I think Trump needed to be there at the announcement rather than the two doing a joint event that weekend when nobody was really paying attention. So that there was that, but also there is an impact because if you look at social media, you have a lot of RFK supporters now saying, well, I guess I'm voting for Trump. They may not like him, but they at this point hate what the Democrats did to RFK. So there's very little chance that an RFK supporter is going to back Harris, especially given that Harris did not win a single primary vote. So I think the effect will show up in the election. It's not showing up in the public right now because most of the media that's reporting on this is, swinging it with a Harris bias. And you're also seeing the huge mistrust that RFK supporters have of the media and of the pollsters because, with the exception of Fox News, nobody even granted RFK Jr. an interview. Now, whether you think he had a chance at winning or not, the fact that he's a Kennedy should have granted him an interview. The
I
fact,
actually disagree. Do you know what I agree? Do you know what I believe is even more important?
what?
Not about okay. If the premise, the criteria is if you could win, I'm not so sure that's a very healthy bar. It's about a free exchange of ideas,
Yes,
and he certainly had enough support and had enough, let's just say, credible stances on many things. Might not agree on them, but certainly no idiot and deserved the light of day. Not giving him that shows the collusion between the DNC and corporate media.
it certainly does. The media has been, and we've said this for years, an arm of the Democratic Party. And
And the swamp.
CNN is trying to break free of that. We've seen that over the past few months, but we've also seen their own people fight back against that because they're so indoctrinated.
I think, yes, I think CNN has made some good strides. I think it's very important that they do a fair and a thorough job tomorrow, or that broadcast comes out, because I think you're right. If they end up talking about donuts and global warming, I think you could just kiss this one goodbye. But also speaking about kissing things goodbye, Democrats, we look at RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, the party, member democracies on the ballot. Well, happens to be that Cornell West basically saying that Kamala, her party, she probably had nothing to do with it because she's not that bright, basically offered to relieve him of his debt. I don't know how he has debt, but that's not my issue. And also offered him a job in some type of a job in the administration, as well as there's some obstruction on the Jill Stein front as well, isn't there? Party of democracy.
Yes, there is. Democracy is on the ballot, and the Democrats are doing everything they can to subvert democracy. They are suing to keep Green Party candidate Jill Stein off the ballot, especially in battleground states. They tried to bribe Cornell West to pull out of the campaign because they know he's only both he and Jill Stein are only pulling votes away from Harris.
Yeah, that's a
Neither one,
definite yes.
yeah, neither one of the, both of them are actually to the left of Harris. So there's no way they're going to pull from Trump. They're also trying to, in the courts, force RFK Jr. to stay on the ballot in red leaning states and battleground states while trying to force him off the ballot in blue leaning states.
Isn't that a
Why?
little convoluted?
It is very
How could you
convoluted.
have one without? How could you have one with the other? Makes no sense.
Yeah,
Like I want you off my property, but I insist that you camp out in my backyard. Okay.
well, no, it's not quite the right analogy. It's more like I want you off of my property, but I want to require you to stay on my neighbor's lawn.
There you go. I like that better.
you,
Yes.
you know, it's
As always, Dr.
that's what
Lopkin.
they're
Yes.
trying to do, because they know, I mean, let's face it, the entire democratic process has been subverted by the Democratic Party. There was no real primary. They refused to allow RFK Jr. to run. Let's face it, if RFK Jr. had been allowed to run in the primary, right now, he probably would have been the Democratic candidate.
I would say there's probably very good chance he would be. Yes, especially with his ideology, especially in the green agenda and other issues, and obviously Uncle Joe's ability to, at this point, I don't know, pay a sentence, possibly.
Yes.
Who knows? I think also, do you think that Mama is going to have to answer to the fact that she was behind this anti-American, and I'm not saying that for a fact, anti-American, anti-patriotic, dangerous cover-up of someone that was essentially out to lunch?
Well, the only way she's going to be held responsible is if the voters come out and say, you know what, we don't trust you. We are not voting for you. Because the media is never going to hold her accountable. They were complicit in the cover up.
No question about it. You talk about election deniers and basically obstructing democracy. We have Jack Smith refining his indictment. I think that's a little bit on the obstructionist level. Your thoughts on the impact, if any, on the election? Is it baked in already, or does it have a temporary impact on Trump because it does throw off, let's just say, a week of the news cycle?
I don't think it's going to have any effect because it's a brand new indictment, which means now, first of all, we've said this over and over again, a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. It's not an indication of guilt or innocence. It's just this is what we want to do. So the indictment itself doesn't carry any weight. He's going to have to now file new charges. The judge isn't going to be able to hear any of this until after the election at this point. So the fact of the matter is, they're doing it to try to promote their lawfare agenda. And it's not even just about the candidates. More more evidence has now come out in Georgia that yes, the 2020 election was hinky. So they have passed laws saying we are not going to certify the 2024 election unless we are convinced that there was no foul play on the part of either party. And the
It's a
Democrats
bullshit case.
and yes,
It's a
and the
bullshit case. Let's cut
Democrats
the
are
shit.
trying to sue to stop them, saying no, you have to certify no matter if there was foul play or not. Uh,
Yep.
they have been fighting in Arizona. Arizona passed laws to promote election security, and they're fighting against it. And the Supreme Court just said no, these laws can stand. So they are desperate to allow themselves to rig the election. And I think they believe that's the only way Harris can win.
I think, yeah. Well, they always want to double down and ensure, as far as the party of democracy, anyone that believes that, either you're totally indoctrinated or you're not particularly bright. I think it's the latter. Thank you very much. There is an expanding war situation in the Middle East as Israel is now involved in the West Bank in some operations. Yes, it's always bad that there's a war. That's a subject that goes without question, or a viewpoint that goes without question. But what I want to ask you, Dr. Eric E. Lopkin, and what our listeners probably want to know about is I've heard some interesting comments, decisions, and editorials about its impact on the election. Puts
Yeah,
Kamala in a very
it put
precarious position. How do you like
it
that?
does. It puts her in a very precarious position because Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East. we cannot simply stop supporting them. And in fact, there is nothing Harris could do at this point to cause us to stop supporting them, because both houses of Congress have overwhelmingly said they support Israel. Biden, while flip-flopping slightly, has still maintained that he will provide Israel with weapons, and he actually did back off on some of the conditions that he put on, primarily because he still thinks that he is going to be able to get a peace treaty out of this, that he can go off into the sunset with an Israeli Palestinian peace treaty under his belt.
Okay, you know, my MLB contract. Hold on for a second. The
Yeah.
mailman's here. I think he's delivering it. Sorry, I'm going to have to hang up. Just
Yeah,
kidding. Yeah,
yes,
there you go.
you've got about as much chance of getting that MLB contract as Biden has getting the peace treaty. Clinton also
There you go.
thought that he was going to be able to get a peace treaty, and to this day he cannot believe, he talks about this all the time, that the Israelis were willing to give up almost everything the
Everything.
Palestinians want. The only thing they insisted on was that the Palestinians stop bombing them and admit that they have the right to exist. And the Palestinians refused. Guess what? They're not going to give in on that now either. So
And
that's
by the
not
way,
going
speaking
to
of that, you know,
happen.
our RFK is a major supporter of Israel.
Yes, he
Did you
is.
know that, Dr. Lopkin? And he basically has a line, old Democratic school, by the way, that no, he just said. I actually just heard this interview today that he said, listen, the Gaza could be a I don't know, jewel of the Nile, whatever you want to call it, right? A destination right on the ocean, and he actually called the Palestinians spoiled. He goes, they're the most spoiled people on earth. We spent it's like 100 and something dollars per capita to rebuild Europe. They've already spent thousands per capita for a shithole. That will
Yes,
get you thrown out of the Democratic Party.
yes, it
That will
will.
get you
It
thrown
will
out.
now, but it's very accurate. So much money went into the Gaza Strip, both not just American money, United Nations money, Israeli money. So much money went into the Gaza Strip that they could have created a booming economy to match anything else in the Middle East. But instead, Hamas diverted that money to
Stole it.
bringing in weapons, to building tunnels, and and in planning attacks on Israel rather than benefiting their own people.
Why isn't that part of the curriculum at Harvard and Columbia? And how come it's not in the curriculum that Bill Clinton was effing pissed at Arafat because, like you said, they got everything they wanted except the little bow on the cake. So were
Because
they ever really interested? Okay, it was the best deal, but that's not taught at
no,
Columbia.
that's not
I
taught,
guarantee you, it's not.
because
Doesn't fit the narrative.
Iran and their allies have poured tons of money into the United States higher education system to make sure that that is not taught. And you can track the money yourself. Take a look at who is donating to these organizations, to these universities. There is a ton of Middle Eastern money that is geared towards influencing an entire generation of American students.
Well, they've done a great job. Let's call a spade a spade. Job well done. And whenever there's money, there's influence. You don't pay people money just because you like spending money. Sorry. You go on a date, spend some money, you want that woman to be impressed by you. Okay, wherever the situation is, unless you're giving it to charity, and that's another issue as well. But yeah, where there's money, there's influence. Speaking of influence, we have Zuckerberg admitting that he covered up the laptop from hell. Oh well.
Not just the laptop, but he also admitted in a letter to Jim Jordan. So this is now part of the evidence against Joe Biden in the investigation by Congress, that they were pressured to keep COVID information that the administration did not want getting out off of their platform. And he said they weren't happy about it, but they did comply because the White House put pressure on them.
But that's anti-democratic, isn't that?
It's
What's going
anti
on?
democratic. It's against the First Amendment of freedom of speech. You know, let's
You know,
at this point,
trivial.
the current Democratic Party bears no resemblance to the party of JFK.
Can I interject one
Uh,
thing, Dr. Lopkin, on that? RFK, yeah, he's got some idiosyncrasies. I heard him in this interview, and you know something? It's like a time warp. Like that is the Democratic Party of like 30 years ago. Totally,
Yes,
I'd be fine with it. No big deal. Totally fine. And now you got Mamala 30 years later. It's just it's unimaginable,
yes. Again,
and it's also unimaginable. Go ahead.
we say this all the time. We keep hearing it from lifelong Democrats saying, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. Well, right now, the only people you've got left in the Democratic Party
Nutcases
are the far left and the brainwashed. And it's time
and the brain dead and the
that these
brain dead.
brainwashed, well, brain dead and far left are pretty much synonymous, but
There you go.
it is time these folks who have been brainwashed take a good look at this party and go, wait a minute. This is not the Democratic Party I grew up with. It's certainly not I mean, I was a Democrat, and this is not the Democratic Party that I supported.
To do that, Dr. Lopkin, requires introspection. Introspection requires some degree of intelligence. Therefore, I hate to disappoint you, is not going to happen. Sorry about that.
Well, no,
What is
I think
happening?
it can
It's
still
never going to
happen
happen.
if Harris
Never.
loses,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
the
Yep.
Democrats
Once again,
cannot handle loss, and that will force them to start looking, going, okay, you know what? This is bad. We couldn't whitewash this enough to get her past the American public. We're going to have to start listening to what the people say. Even diehard liberal Democrats like Zach Galifianakis have come out over the last week and said, you have to stop listening to Hollywood elite and start listening to the core of America.
well, you know something. Don't really feel too sorry for him. We have to agree that Uncle Joe the last month has not had, you know, remember this the old adage, the best week ever. Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, he didn't have the best month ever, and by the way, the Supreme Court just rebuffed his latest student loan forgiveness thing. Things aren't really going Uncle Joe's way.
No,
Oh well.
in fact, most of the regulations and decisions that Biden has pushed over the last 4 years are now falling apart as they hit the courts, because these were all rulings that Congress would have to make a law for them to take effect. And since Congress didn't, Biden decided to make administrative regulations, executive orders, and these don't pass legal muster. So the courts are now shooting these down right and left. And thanks to the Supreme Court reversing course on the Chevron decision, and for those of our listeners who are not familiar with the Chevron decision, basically the Chevron decision said that the government administrations, the departments of regulatory, like the FDA, the FCC, the Department of Energy, these were full of experts. And the Chevron decision said that judges needed to defer to these experts? Well, the Supreme Court just said, in fact, there is no evidence that there is any expertise in government agencies. And so the judges need to look at each of these decisions on a case by case basis. And yes, the judges can overturn them. And now the judges are saying, yes, there's no expertise behind this. This is something that Congress needs to pass as a law, not a government agency.
Well, expertise and Biden's cabinet are mutually exclusive. There you go.
Well,
Uh,
I'll go further than that and just reiterate something we've said over and over again. The best and the brightest don't work for the government.
no, that was not always the case, but it certainly is now. Speaking of things ending, we talked about, best and the brightest no longer going into government. Well, DEI looks like it's fading from popularity. Lowe's, a major corporation, multi-billion-dollar corporation, just ended it. And then Harley Davidson. Now, to be fair, motorcycle sales in general are declining, but they are ahead of the curve, a curve you don't want to be ahead on because of certain initiatives. Again, woke board of directors out of touch. They probably never even rode a Harley, right? And they're losing sales as we speak. So is DEI maybe one of if Mamala loses, I think DEI is just finished. You can just
Yeah, corporate. Well, I think regardless of whether Harris wins or not, DEI is leaving the corporation because the only reason that DEI was able to be pushed through on in so many cases was a McKinsey study that showed that DEI policies were going to benefit the bottom line. And
mm-hmm.
this has not only has this not been true, nobody has been able to duplicate that McKinsey study. And McKinsey won't release their methodology because they say it's a trade secret. So nobody's
No,
been
it's
able to
because it was bullshit. How do you
yeah,
like that?
nobody has been able to figure out how they came up with this. Now, Lowe's actually did a really quick 180 because Lowe's and Home Depot ended up on opposite sides of the spectrum. The founder of Home Depot is a longtime Republican donor.
Mm-hmm.
He's a longtime Trump donor. And the woke started yelling, well, you know what? We are going to boycott Home Depot and we can go buy things at Lowe's. And Home Depot said, you know what? You keep threatening to boycott us. It hasn't affected us financially yet, so we don't care what you say. Lowe's decided to play into this and say, yes, we will support Pride. We are there for you. And the anti DEI, anti woke audience went, yeah, take a look at what we did to Bud Light. And Lowe's went, oh, and immediately said,
And Target, by the
yes,
way,
and Target, and there are a number of others. And Lowe's went, yeah, you know
Disney.
what? Not only are we going to disband our DEI policies, we are not going to take part in any pride events anymore. We are not going to be financially supporting LGBTQ causes. We are out.
Oh
And
well.
and and it's this is just the latest in a long line of companies. So far, just this year, we've got Lowe's, Best Buy, John Deere, Harley Davidson, all getting rid of their DEI departments. We've seen other companies cut back. While they haven't officially gotten rid of the DEI department, they have fired their DEI officers because
May I
D.
interject something?
Go
Do
ahead.
you know what would be a hot topic on your resume? Right
Okay.
next to like buggy whip marketer would be DEI administrator.
Yes, you're not getting a
Your job. They'd be waiting in line for you.
yes. The fact of the matter is, DEI ended up in corporate America being a money pit. It did not increase employee engagement like it was supposed to. It did not increase the bottom line like it was supposed to. There was no corporate benefit. The only benefit that any business got from doing this woke agenda was they got a pat on the back from the wackos in the left. Now, we saw last year Target went all out on Pride Month. And this year they decided, you know what? We're going to stay out of this. We are not going to do this.
Their
Target's
stock's going
profit
up.
this Target's profits and stocks have gone up for the first time in years. There is a financial benefit to not kowtowing to the left. And the big problem that most of these businesses are starting to figure out, especially businesses like Lowe's and John Deere and Harley Davidson, is guess what? These left wing proponents of DEI and woke policies never bought their products to begin with. They never shopped there. So they're
They never drank
boycotting,
that.
right? They never drank their beer. So their threats of boycotts for not supporting them don't carry any financial threat.
Yeah, it's like a rabbi threatening to boycott Oscar Mayer. Doesn't have so many teeth, does it? There you go. Well,
Exactly.
Doctor, we're over our 300th, 302, right? Good
Yeah.
batting average, 302. You're probably a Hall of Famer. I would lifetime. You are a Hall of Famer yourself, Dr. Lopkin, and a contributor to a very, very cool book, correct?
Hiya, thank you. My new book, Cracking the Rich Code, Volume 14. I am a contributing author with Jim Britt, Brian Tracy. It is a Tony Robbins project. And last week we found out it is now an international bestseller. So, yes, if
As it should be, Dr. Lopkin. Just another, selfishly, just another feather in Carnivore Radio's hat, isn't it?
it is, it just goes to show, when it comes to personal success and business success, we know what we're talking about.
You are correct. Dr. Lopkin, this concludes another great 302. Just want to put that in your be in the bonnet. A 302 edition, and we'll be back next week. We have a special guest. Remember, like 2 months ago, we talked about nets with the Gen Zers and stuff,
Yep.
failure to launch on steroids. We have a psychiatrist who's in the middle of writing a book, and he's going to shed some insights from a professional's perspective on this issue. Just a little bit of the show, and then we'll get into our usual red meat and interesting topics. I'm sure this one's going to be a good way to start off in an interesting way as well. And if our listeners want to comment on our shows or give us input, how can they do that, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes, they can go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you think. You can also go to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page. Messages there. We want to hear what you think. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Radio at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. See you next week.
We'll see you then.